podcast. Joining me today is a longtime friend and colleague, Myles Eldreth, college professor and senior manager at Transunion. He has a surprising blend of superpowers. By day, he's a government contracts and compliance expert, and by night, he teaches business, finance, economics, international affairs, management, and accounting. He's a podcaster, a career coach, and an avid gardener. He's also one of the most astute observers of current events that I've ever known. You've heard of Futurists? Myles is the consummate Now-ist. Myles, it is awesome to have you on the podcast today.
Never heard the word Now-ist until you said that, and I like that. You know, it made me laugh because it was kind of close to Maoist. I was like, I'm not that. But the pleasure is mine, and congrats on a little over a year you've been doing this, which is crazy because I looked at the episode list. I was listening to your back catalog, and I'm like, wow, it's been a year. Yeah. Turn around, and it just goes by.
You. It does. Thank you.
So, yeah, totally happy to be here.
Thank you. The reason why I wanted to have you on is that the world is going through a hard time right now. And I'm hoping that by sharing some of the experiences that you've had and observances that you've had in dealing with some of your own recent challenges, that it would help me and our audience to navigate through tough times as elegantly as I feel that you have. So tell me a little bit about the last few years and some of the challenges that you've faced and observed.
I'll start with myself versus observations. One of the beauties of being a teacher, as long as I have, especially in the Northern Virginia area, is you get everyone from everywhere. And I've seen and heard some experience through my students, some very tragic. But in my personal life, I lost both my parents in a very short period of time to cancer. And it was rough, because I was always the person with the old dad anyway. My dad was 48 when I was born, so everybody thought he was my grandpa, even though he didn't look that way. He didn't really look old until he got sick. When you're younger, you look at your parents, you don't see old. You see, they're still kind of young. And my dad was always older, but I could tell when he got sick, like his hair went white, and all this other stuff. He slowed down. He couldn't fix stuff like he was always doing. And I didn't like watching that. I definitely didn't. And then my mother, who died last year, not even a little over that, I was intensely involved in that. I took care of her for the last 4 years of her life, in and out of chemo treatments. And just one of the worst things about that was sitting in the room, where you're getting chemo, and just sitting with her and looking around the room and seeing someone my age in one of those chairs. And of course, it's like, and that's happened. I have a coworker actually who's 42 years old who found out he had colon cancer or something. And wow, it gives you perspective. And I struggle greatly with this. And if you're talking about challenges, it's like, all right, you would think this would force you to focus.
Yeah.
Well, it did for a bit. And then COVID happened and all this other crazy stuff that's going on. The politics stuff that we talk about constantly that are absolute nonsense, and the other thing with your parents is I'm an adult, I have a career and a family. I'm not like destitute or anything, but your parents are the only people on the earth, aside from maybe your significant other, they're always there for you without question, whether they complain about it like my mom did. The last thing I remember, that was with her is I got sick and I had to go to the hospital right before she found all the tumors in her brain. And being as sick as she was still sitting right there with me,
Yeah.
So I'm like, yeah. As far as students, other things I've seen, I told you this, I had a lady who was a first generation immigrant from Syria. And she wore a hijab, but I could tell she had some scars or something going on. And, I was like, I don't know how to empathetically ask about this, but she just was an open book. She was talking about how during the war, the conflicts, she had her house burned down and her family in front of her, and all this other stuff by soldiers or rebels or whatever. I don't remember which side it was that it doesn't really matter, honestly, if you think about it.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting here, I'm like, wow, what an amazing person you are. And you're here. I don't know how you got here, but good for you. And um, you're positive and you're functioning and you're just, I'm just amazed by people like this.
Yeah.
I have students that are so far on the spectrum that, you know, as far as autism, Asperger's, I'm at the let's say high functioning side of that, where I can still talk and do things, but I see them and the struggles they go through as well, and just people with various disabilities that kind of just get pushed through our system. I'm like, good for you. It gives me context too, because there's
Right.
people that have never met their parents. There's like my wife who's adopted. Luckily is adopted by wonderful people,
Mm,
um, but yeah, I had some career bumps and things happen and some things not work out the way I wanted to, but you know, it it ends up sounding like complaining after a while, but you kind of have to take the good with the bad in this case. But again, my students, when I talk to them, I'm just like, all right, they just inspire me, because I'm like, you're still going. Or especially these students that are like our age and they come back and they're all apprehensive because everybody else in the class is 20 and they're 50 something or whatever it is, and I'm like, I had
yeah.
an older Vietnamese man in my last class, and I'm like, good for you, man, because he's just like, I'm tired of doing what I'm doing for my career. I'm going to go do something else, and just decided, you
Yeah.
know.
How do we get through hard times?
Well, if I were to say this is a 1, 2, 3 process here, and this is stuff that I'm very, very personally, I struggle with these things.
Mm,
Realize there are things you cannot control.
right.
Actually, a lot of things, a lot, most things, honestly, what you can control in your sphere of influence is very little.
Yeah.
And it's not about controlling. In many cases, it's kind of just like, all right, well, that happened, or that's going to happen. What's the next step? Like, I've been on LinkedIn. LinkedIn has this whole looking for work thing now. You can put on your profile,
Hmm.
that. And I've read so many stories of people that hopefully they really are true, where they're talking about being rejected. There's a lady that was talking about getting to like the end of a job interview where she never made it to the hiring manager, but she had 3 or 4 interviews before that.
Wow.
And there's companies now that are uh, there used to be ghosting on the side of the other folks, and now there's ghosting on the company side.
Hmm.
So can't control any of that. You can't. You know, I have a 6-year-old, and as you know, with kids, they do all sorts of things that are ridiculous, and I'm realizing I just can't control that either. It is what it is. So number
Right.
2, minimize negative information. Uh, in my case, that's getting rid of most social media. I
Mm,
hate to say it. I feel
hmm.
like the older I get, the more excuse I have for that, because I'm just like, aside from
Right.
professional things, I'm like, why am I looking at Twitter? Like, why would I care about Instagram, or Snapchat, especially, or any of this stuff?
Right.
Facebook even barely.
Hmm.
I'm just, problem is, yeah, you can control what you see, but then you just put yourself in a bubble anyway of echo chambery stuff that you agree with, or the like cat videos, or whatever makes you happy. I keep telling
Right.
Christine that, because she'll be like, did you see
Right.
this thing on Facebook? Or my wife, and I'm like, no, I didn't, because I don't look at it, because I don't need the stress.
Right.
you
Right.
know um Maximize positives. Again, I have a history of bipolar disorder in my family, massive
Mm-hmm.
negativity, depression, all these other things that are negatives, and I do my best to be positive and maximize positives. You
Mm-hmm.
can't always do that. Mark, I think you're excellent at that. At least, and I'm sure you struggle internally, but externally you present a very positive image, like, which I've seen more and more people struggle with that. And I had a lady at work that I've never heard complain about anything, but she went off the other day about how busy she was and how much help she needed, and been at the company 47 years. 47 years. So she is a encyclopedia of stuff,
Wow.
credit and whatever else. She's a
Wow.
grandma, one of the nicest ladies I've ever met. But she was like, because when they were foisting Agile on us in other cases, she
Mm-hmm.
was like, I do not have the bandwidth for this. I do not. It sounds interesting, and she was asking one of her employees if he could handle it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it was just like, whoa. But now that just kind of brought things in there to where everybody's kind of struggling, and we all need to look at more positives and then be present. I
Mm-hmm.
am so bad with that. I am forcing mentally. I think Simon Sinek was talking about how when he goes out with friends, they only bring one phone, you know, and that's usually just to take pictures of food or
Yeah.
something like that, so they can actually have a conversation. It was good. I don't know how truthful he is with that, because we're all just stuck with these things, but I've been trying so hard to be present, to
Mm.
be here. My crazy brain won't let me do that sometimes, but at the same time, it's hard to be a nowist and not know what's going on. But being present kind of removes the whole nowist thing a little bit, because the now right now is not super positive.
Mm.
Um, and
Mm-hmm.
the last thing is exercise your mind, body, all of those, and psyche, and read.
Yeah.
I mean, read as much as you can. I read constantly, and
Mm-hmm.
from every type of organization. I read real stuff. I read fantasy. I read whatever, um, just random things that interest me. But it's always something, that I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, this sounds interesting, and then I end up getting into it. But yeah, and I think you know, exercising is important. Getting outside, especially working at home. I mean, my
Yeah.
God,
Right.
because our jobs, I don't know, there's been a lot of I just read an article on LinkedIn, speaking of reading, about all the babysitting software they've ramped up because everybody's working at home, stuff
Mm.
that can sense your heat whether you're sitting there or not. And I'm like, all right, so you want us to have a balance but you don't. So
Mm.
the companies are just as culpable in this,
Yeah.
you know.
So, what purpose does difficulty, pain, suffering, challenges, what purpose do they serve?
um it's all part of life, honestly.
Mm.
Like, I feel like, I hate to criticize certain things, but and I don't, I'm not including my young folks in this or my students, but I feel like part of the reason there's strife in some cases is because we're going through actually a real period of suffering that a lot of young folks just never really experienced. In many
Mm.
cases, we didn't either. The way we grew up in the 80s, 90s, it's a
Right.
pretty great time to grow up, you know.
Yeah.
But our grandparents and our parents remember real suffering. They remember food shortages and depressions and
Mhm.
constant wars that they had to be drafted into, And now we've got a real crisis. Um, whether it's manufactured or not, people keep telling me this, and I'm like, all right, I'm not going to get into crazy conspiracy theory. Just deal with what's in front of you, and maybe that's true or whatever.
Mhm.
Um, so it was something I've been trying to instill in my daughter. She just wants to say things are too hard and just quit, which unfortunately I was like too when I was younger. So it's like, despite me wanting to help her, I try not to, and then that frustrates me because I want to help her, right?
Right.
But it's
Yeah.
like I feel like I'm too harsh sometimes, but I kind of counterbalance my wife when she just waits till she gets really frustrated at me. I'm just like, nope, stop that right now, you know. But I feel like I'm too harsh, but it's a reminder to myself to keep working harder for her sake and mine.
Hmm.
And I'm always like, where's the line with the pain, difficulty, and suffering that I impart? And same as an instructor, it's like you have due dates, you have late grades, you have all this. It's like, how flexible are you?
Right.
Because there's no real standard in higher education of that stuff. It's all subjective based on the teacher
Hmm.
in many cases.
Sure. Sure.
And I'm pretty clear on my requirements, but most of the time I'm like, with my students, I'm like, just communicate. If you don't tell me what's going on, I cannot help you. But
Hmm.
if you're forthright with me, you only get so many dead grandpas or whatever. But um
Right.
and because I'm like, um if you're gonna make up something, you got to make up. Sorry.
Yeah.
But either way, I, I'm okay with working with anybody about this. It's the same at work. We all have deadlines. We all have
Sure.
issues, and I don't know what people are going through, you know. And I'm always very cognizant of that. When somebody takes some extra time to get me a thing, and they're like, "Oh, I'm so sorry it's late," or "I'm sorry I sent you the wrong information," and I'm like, "It's totally fine, You
Mm.
got it to me eventually." Like asking, some of the stuff I have to ask for is very complicated because some of the stuff the businesses work on is extremely complicated,
Right.
and you have to talk through it. And of course, sales wants an answer like, right now, but that's not possible always. So I get it from my end, and I'm always like very aware of other people, whatever's going on.
Is there good in suffering?
Of course,
Mm.
of course there is, but I think suffering can be manufactured in some cases. It's like when you say somebody's a hypochondriac, um,
Right.
or I know this because part of being dishonest with yourself and with others, you surround yourself with this idea that something is always wrong and you're always going to need help or whatever it is, because it feels good to be taken care of, right?
Yeah.
But you
Yeah.
can't. Part of suffering is letting go of that safety blanket in a way, and my
Mhm.
parents were that in many cases. You know, my mom especially. My dad was old school silent generation, so he
Mhm.
wasn't the most emotional. I think our dads were very similar in
Yeah.
that sense. Hardworking, they loved you. They didn't really say it a whole lot, but that's
Right.
okay. You know, whereas my mother was very much involved and very constantly asking me if I'm okay about every little thing. Like recently, I did something stupid where I dropped the power drill on my foot.
Oh.
Of all things, on my toe, and um, it's okay, but it hurt quite a bit, and I had to deal with it and all sorts of crazy
Yeah.
nonsense. And the first thing that popped in my head is if, oh God, I can't tell my mom. And then I was like, I can't tell my mom.
Mm.
So,
Wow.
because if I did, she'd constantly bother me about how my foot's doing or whatever. And then I thought about that, and then I entered this sad spiral, and I was like, all right, get at it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Get out of your brain, get out of this idea, enter into, you know. But then the thing, I'm gonna be like that with Claire. That's just how it is,
Hmm.
because it's built into me. But again, is if you other thing is asking for help. I am
Yeah.
terrible at this. Most people
Mhm.
are terrible at this. I have to push so many of my students to be like, what do you need help with? You don't understand a question. I will go through it 100 times until you do. Because I think, and again, because they've had some negative experience with somebody where they did ask for help and that person did not offer or was like, just figure it out.
Right.
And that's again the line with kids is like, where do you do that or where do you help or, you know, something like that. So uh, don't be too proud. I'm the fixer person, man. I'm the teacher. I'm the one that fixes your problems, that answers stuff
Yeah.
sorry, cat,
Yeah.
that, and you have to learn how to help yourself if you are that type of person. And it's very, very hard.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think we learn as a result of the challenges we go through?
Patience. I'm going to say patience a lot
Mm.
because being patient and listening to others is much more important than talking a lot. Part
Mhm.
of suffering is suffering with other people, understanding what they're going through because it gives you context. But, I can't imagine. I've had a couple people I know that have lost children,
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
necessarily to COVID or other things, but I don't know, patience, perseverance, and a real sense of self.
Yeah.
Because when you're younger, you spend most of your time with an idealized version of yourself. And when you get older, you meet your real self. And that real self has all these flaws and
Right.
weird ticks and it's hard to own the suffering and just mistakes and things that you're not good
Yeah.
at, right?
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
tag teaming. If you're married, you've been married a long time like me, and you have to tag team things with your spouse. I need to get better at that. I'm used to just, all right, I'm going to take charge, I'm going to take this over, and it's like that's not how. You can't. I mean, some things, but for the most part, it's got to be a tag team.
Right. Right.
um but learning from suffering, man, it's like a constant process,
Hmm.
you know and empathy is the big part of it. There's all these discussions going on nationally about stuff, and it's like
Hmm.
even if you're predisposed to have a certain opinion about what somebody else's opinion is based on what you think, how you think they're going to present stuff,
Right. Right.
you should still listen first before you blurt things out of your mouth. You know, um, so it's like it's really easy to read news and be like, oh God, this person, that person. You don't even know that person, and until you know that person and you've dug in to whatever they're suffering through, or whatever, you cannot honestly form any opinions. And if you are, you're just being dishonest or whatever, right? So that's the way I look at life. You're a blank canvas, right? And I don't care about the rest of the externalities. You paint it in with your discussions with me, your background, your whatever. And if I don't know any of that, then I'm making zero assumptions about you. Zero, because I want to know you. I don't care about any of the other stuff. And the you is interesting to me. The externalities and the other stuff is just, you know, is not necessary to even consider at first until you know the you of that person.
Right, right. One of the things that impresses me about you is that you've gone through a lot lately, especially in the last few years, yet you seem to absorb it and move forward. How do you do that?
I don't, to be honest. I mean, I move forward regardless. It's more of just stubbornness that was put into me by my mother mostly. Of, I got stuff to deal with it, and then
Mhm.
sometimes deal with the emotions after the fact. And that's not really the way you want to operate in life, unfortunately. There is a very real medical condition called broken-hearted disease, and it's like
Mhm.
Togasubo something or other. I can't remember what the actual phrase is.
Yeah.
And I felt I was very acutely suffering from that,
Mm.
at some point last year. And then, because it's funny, because when I lost my dad, it was a shock. And we lost our dad right around the same time, which is really weird, man.
Yeah.
Like, I was interesting. We met, and I was like, it's just something we connected over, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But it wasn't as much of a, I'm going to say I missed him, and I had, but when I lost my mom, it was like I lost both my parents all over again, you
Mm.
know, and it was I just, we had built this space for her in my house, and
Yeah.
her and I were finally in a good place relationship wise, and she was happy to, and then just, all of a sudden, and I struggled for months and months and months. I will recommend, some form of therapy for folks if they need it. I should have probably done more. I should probably do more. Um, but yeah, I mean, I'm just now somewhat feeling normal after losing my mom last year, basically acting as a caretaker, that being my entire identity. I'm rediscovering myself. You
Mhm.
have to rediscover yourself. You are not the you were before that whatever tragedy happened. I'm a different person.
Mm.
You
Wow.
know, I'm not. That person is gone. That me, the Miles, that's whole identity that was tied into, you know, Northern Virginia in many cases was my whole life, where I
Wow.
grew up out there. Now, and all my family is gone. My grandmother moved out, everybody. So one thing I've done too is just I had to stay away from certain things that triggered all these emotions all the time.
Hmm.
You know, recently unpacked, and I found a book my mom started writing that she didn't even tell me about. It was a grandma book, and it
Oh.
was for my daughter, and it was
Oh.
like all these thoughts, like she it was very, very much her, very blunt and very to the point. But there was a whole section about what she thought about my dad when she met him, and what
Yeah.
my grandparents thought, which was what he was too old.
Oh.
But they changed their mind about that. But um and then just some very unfortunately prophetic things that my mom, is as negative as she could be. There's some things that have come about that she was very astute at paying attention to, and that's where I get the Now-ist from.
Yeah.
People don't want to deal in reality, man. They don't.
Yeah.
But trust me, that's part of the reason I still play video games occasionally or whatever, is to get my brain out of this crazy world of stuff that's going on.
Right.
But you kind of have to, and you have to be prepared.
Hmm.
So it's like on top of COVID, everything else is enough to drive anybody insane. The political circus. I've just tried to focus on staying busy and my family.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're paramount, and I felt like my family suffered, the past few years because I was focused on taking care of my mother.
Hmm.
You know, but yeah, it's a process, and it's like there's an Incubus song called "New Skin," and I think that's very accurate. To what's talking about is the you that comes out at the end. The other side of it is not the same you.
Mm.
It's just not.
How important is personal responsibility in getting through hard times?
Paramount. If you don't take responsibility for your situation, including things you cannot control, it will eat you alive. You know, it will, because even the micro decisions are still decisions. I don't know what that is. It's like I heard the term. I was introduced to the term microaggression years ago, and I don't like that term very much. But
I've heard it.
yeah, I would say micro decisions, like little things, like just little behavioral tics and stuff like that, that you can change. That you're just, and they start piling up. And when you go through, a tragedy or whatever it is, like a real tragedy, those things become very apparent because they build this like monster of wall you have to push down. Just my vice is like, I don't eat a lot of food, but I tend to eat bad food and other stuff, and I have to remove myself from that situation. I can't have certain food in the house. I can't be around things, or it's just like I treat it like I'm a drug addict with certain things, you know. Because I've seen actual drug addicts and other things, being a musician for a few years and some stuff, and what people have struggled through. Personal responsibility is huge, man. We everything that's going on right now is partially due to a lack of empathy and personal responsibility. Period. All the language coming out of politics, all the let's say misinformed nonsense about coronavirus or whatever.
Right.
On both sides, or on any sides, from out of people's mouths, especially concerning masks or not masks or whatever, all the different ways schools are operating or not. It's ridiculous. But politics is built into misinformation and lack of personal responsibility. So of course you have to do that, because it's always someone else's fault, and you create problems you aren't really going to fix, because if you fix those problems, then you won't get elected again based on the problem you actually thought up. So there's zero responsibility. Life is all about personal responsibility. You own everything, and you own you also own the fact that some things are just going to happen, and say, all right, what are you going to do? Like, you own a house, Mark. I'm like, we moved in here, I had a roof leak, right when I moved in. It's a 50-year roof. It was simply just because a piece of flashing came up on some plumbing pipe on my roof, and I got it fixed, but I got really annoyed, and then I was like, what are you going to do? Could have been worse, right? Could have been the whole roof, could have blown off, whatever.
Yeah.
So there's so many, you can accept it, move through it, or you can just say, well, whatever, I can't control it. So, but yeah, personal responsibility is so important. It really is.
Why do you think we go through hard times?
That's what makes us human, man. That's why we're advanced as we are, because we figure out ways, one, to make our lives easier, but two, we figure out tools to make ourselves stronger in that sense too, to deal with actual hard times. I think it's pretty funny. It's like what we're going through now. We used to tease about like zombie apocalypse and what would you do, and all these people are like, oh, I'd just get a shotgun and go out and take them all. No, you wouldn't. You would not. You'd cower in your house or whatever it is.
Right.
It's like, it's so funny. Like, true hard times, people have this crazy concept of what they're going to do when the proverbial S hits the fan, right? Like, if you're going to say that, what you're going to do is react really quickly unless you plan for it or otherwise. It's like, you can't plan for crazy situations. That's why when you do active shooter training and stuff for schools, we do that at Nova, and otherwise it's run, hide, fight. It's not fight, hide, run, or fight, fight, fight.
Right.
Because you're most likely not prepared unless you're a trained individual. So that's the big part of it. I consider myself relatively aware of what's going on and prepared, but you can only prepare so much. You got to live your life too.
Sure.
There's that. But I like to hear people talk about these things. I think it's just they say stuff like that to make themselves feel better. We all do, to a point.
Yeah. You talked about it earlier, but at what point do we need to lean on others or get others involved to help us?
Probably more often than I do, to be honest. I don't like asking for help, but I've learned not asking for help is actually pretty selfish sometimes. It really is, because you're saying you can handle it, and I don't know, because you can't in some cases. I will admit there's times, where I'm depressed and I can't function or whatever because something hits me, and everybody gets like that. Then I'm just like, well, all these other people have worse problems. You can't live your life like that. Your problems are your problems,
Right.
and you could be
Right.
empathetic towards others' problems and try to help them, but you can't help anybody if you don't help yourself, and you can't help yourself unless you stick your hand out and ask every once in a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why you have friends. That's why you have family. Um, Even if you're like me, who is a natural, let's say, helper person, I have been since I was little,
Yeah.
you have to ask for help. You have
Mm.
to. That's why you have friends. That's family, and otherwise, you know. And I can tell because I actually start feeling physically sick or overwhelmed when I start getting to a point where I know, all right, I've had too much at this point. There's too much going on,
Hmm.
and I know what that feeling is, and then I've got to ask somebody for help. My boss constantly is like, "What do you need help with?" And she's awesome, great boss,
Yeah.
Angelica. I'm gonna call her out by name here, but she'll probably listen to this. But I'm blessed with somebody who constantly says that when actually she needs help because we're all freaking overworked. We're in a rowboat with a bucket throwing water out. Like every company is kind of like that right now
Right.
because we're
Right.
all strained for resources, we're strained for capital, we're strained for trying to grow in this whatever new environment.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's all about helping each other, but also asking for help when you need it. Because if you don't ask for help, you're going to get overwhelmed, and then you can't ask anybody else for help because you're too overwhelmed. That's the way I look at it.
I want to shift the conversation a little bit to something a little bit lighter and a little bit more aspirational and inspirational, and just get your thoughts on a few questions about success and just kind of general life lessons and things like that, because I always find that interesting in the guests that I have. So I want to start out with this question: what is one secret of your success that you could share with others?
Well, it's actually something I kind of learned from you, and I would call it extreme scheduling
That's
because
fine.
we hear a lot about time management, right? Like college is so focused on time management. They have to do SDV classes, which are student development, which is about learning to manage time. That's such nonsense. Like you can't manage time. The clock turns. You can stop the clock, but it's still turning.
Right.
Whether you want it to or not, and you have to schedule things. And I used to make fun of route. I mean, when we were at EDS HP, when I worked with Keith and Mike and all those guys around, sitting around me, they were older. Mike was 60 something. Keith was 10 or 11 years older than me. They were such creatures of routine and schedule.
Mm,
They would come in, they would have coffee at the same time, they would arrive to work at the same time and leave. Now, mind you, they didn't have super intense jobs. I would say like a high level management thing where
right.
that wouldn't work because the more you move up, the less your schedule is able to be managed like that.
True.
But I used to be like, wow, and then the older I got, the more I was like, how do I do that? How do
Mm,
I build this routine? What is a routine? Because my dad had one, my mom never did, and unfortunately, I'm more like my mother. So on that side, and I'm trying to build into this schedule where there's times blocked off that I'm not looking at my phone. I'm with my family. And unbridling that from your brain is really hard to do when you lived a certain way your whole life. I've had two jobs for a long time. I've been
yeah.
trying to do it all,
Mm,
right? And you
mhm,
can't, you know, and perseverance and patience, and also be nice to people to a fault until you can't anymore.
yeah.
I like to tell stories too about don't be mean to people in like food service or retail, especially now,
Right. Right.
because they're being the hardest hit. I remember what it was like to work in those industries and have people be mean to me constantly. And
Mm,
when I
mhm,
was young, I was just like, man, whatever, stupid people. But again, you as the person working there, you have to wonder what that person's going through to act like that to you
right.
for no reason. And I feel like the same when I go through like a drive-through line or something, if which I don't that often, but when I do occasionally, and somebody is short or rude or whatever, it's may have been because the 10 people before them screamed at them about putting a French fry wrong somewhere or giving them the wrong sauce. And it's this circle of bad karma,
Yeah.
that goes around. And whether you believe in karma or not, it believes in you. So that's the way I look at it. People in life, people have uh, like what I like to call a God-sized hole inside of them, whether
Yeah.
they believe in God or any type of religion, and you fill it with something. And you
Right.
can choose to fill it with positivity or try to, or you can just fill that with a big old negative, or
Mm.
hopelessness or other things. And one secret to success is scheduling, being nice to people, and taking others with you on that journey.
Hmm.
Whatever success is defined, and success for you will over your lifetime will shift, whatever that is. Right now, success for me is my career and spending as much time with my little girl and my wife as I can,
That's awesome.
and focusing on them.
That's awesome. What's the greatest lesson, either in life or business, that you've ever learned?
It's funny. I found a quote from Van Wilder of all things. I always loved that movie. I don't know why. It's pre Ryan Reynolds being everywhere and all that,
Right,
but
right.
it's a really, really poignant film if you look at how he lived, even at college. Like super smart, obviously like his dad. He could have been a multimillionaire. Just had that magnetic personality. And he had a quote is like, "Don't take life too seriously. You'll never get out alive." And I was like, that's a freaking amazing quote if you think about it.
Yeah, yeah.
I am a textbook overthinker, right? I overthink everything. One of the reasons you talk about Now-ist, yeah, is I'm very acutely aware of everything that's going on. I understand the academic background of why people think the way they do, all these theories that are coming out, all the stuff that everybody's discussing. Do I really need to know all that to combat it or to have a discussion about it?
Hmm.
Maybe not. But again, what's to say I just go sit in what I now have is a gigantic backyard and just watch bunnies jump around in the grass,
Right.
or my neighbor's dog run around, or sit and just look at the beautiful mountains I can see, or watch the cows walk around a farm, watch a train go by, do something like that, and just enjoy life and
Mm.
sit there and just do that instead of just being in front of a screen. Even if I'm not in front of a screen, I feel like my brain is in front of a screen,
Right, right.
and have this conversation. Like later today, we have a mutual friend of ours coming over to visit, with
Yeah.
his little girl.
Hmm.
And I'm hoping, I mean, he and I have other things to discuss, but the the thing is to focus on our daughters, focus on that friendship, on our families, on
Hmm.
on that time together. And we will discuss all the crazy things going on,
Yeah,
but still,
yeah.
it's like again, the Nowist also, that's not necessarily being present, and I need to be
Right.
better about that. But again, I love this. Don't take life too seriously. You'll never get out alive. It's so true.
Yeah.
There's all the noise that's like, you will pay attention to me right now. And it's like, no, I
Right.
won't. I don't need to. What do you want from me? You want money? You want time? What do you want? Pound of flesh? Whatever it is. So, you know,
Yeah. What do you want most for your life?
peace, my friend.
Mm.
Peace. I could use some peace. We all could use some peace and grace.
Yeah.
All this cancel culture nonsense we hear about is due to a lack of grace and peace.
Mm.
And I'm not even talking about that in the religious sense. It's where
Of
it
course.
originates from. But there's a phrase I grew up hearing Catholic. I grew up Catholic was "Peace be upon you," right?
Yeah, of
And if
course.
we sat and we said that to each other, if we did the whole shake your hands and say "Peace be upon you" with other people, maybe we use
Mm.
hand sanitizer first now or whatever is going on.
Right, right.
But I mean, I don't remember
Yeah.
what peace felt like, and I'm forcing myself into a box where I figure out what that is again. Because I
Yeah.
remember, it's just when you're so embroiled in stuff that's negative, you've got to find peace somewhere.
Yeah.
Because if you can, again, you can't center yourself and you end up in the same spiral you're in, and you can't attack your problems like you would normally because you're just so overwhelmed. You just get to the point where you're like, all right, I'm going to do something, and then you're like, and you just freeze. But
Right, right.
peace and grace. I'm just at the point in my life where I'm in a fervent search for peace, whatever that means. And if
Mm.
that ends up being a religious thing, fine. I don't know. Or if it ends up being something else. And that's why I commend everybody. It's like people that say they are uh, like anti-religious or atheist or whatever. I'm like, cool, good for you. I thought I was that at one point, but that's more just you not liking a certain religion or somebody because they don't. And And if somebody's religious or whatever they believe in gives them peace and they are able to project grace because
Yeah.
of that, then good for them. They're living the
Yeah.
life they need to lead. That's the way I look at it. Whatever gets you to that point in your life that you're able to feel the comfort that allows you to be graceful to other people and have peace in your life. I envy you, and I want to know what that secret is. you know,
Mm. If you could give one piece of advice to the world, what would it be?
I have built entire friendships with one simple commonality with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Entire friendships. We could disagree on everything else, down to color of shirt, politics. It doesn't matter what it is. You can take that commonality and build an entire lifelong friendship on that.
Mm.
And I cannot believe that, I refuse to believe that people can't take that to heart nowadays and take all this strife and disagreement and negativity that's actually being manufactured by those in power, to be honest, and get back to this. All right, you and I can be friends. What's something you're into? I ask my students this all. It's like, what are you into?
Right, right.
I can relate to you on almost anything because I like a lot of different things. We can
Mhm.
talk about video games. We can talk about history. We can talk about television shows. We can talk about, I don't know. I'm interested in, like you said, gardening. I'm not handy. I'm learning, but I
Yeah,
want to hear all about it. I love that I know what a frame step is now because I've had to deal with all sorts of window stuff and things like
yeah,
that, and
yeah.
just these technical carpenter gibberish terms and stuff. So, but I built friendships just on discussions around those things, just being interested in what somebody else is saying.
Mm.
Because even if you're not interested at first, you listen.
Hmm.
Like, for example, uh, my daughter's gotten to the age where she'll be watching something on YouTube Kids or whatever, and she'll be like, "Daddy, what's do you know what this person's doing that?" And I will stop what I'm doing and I will sit down and ask her questions and listen. Because I
Mm.
remember how I felt when I was little, when I was excited about something and my parents ignored me or didn't get it, or because my
Mm.
dad was of a very different generation. Even if I don't care at first what she's talking about, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to intently listen and ask questions about it because I love her that much, you know. And you should be able to love somebody else as a human, to be able to find that commonality and build on it. You know, that's the advice I would give because like I said, just a simple connection, a simple spark builds into like massive friendships.
Mhm.
And one of the best examples too is Antonin Scalia and Ruth Ginsburg.
Mm.
They were very obviously vastly different politically, but they
Very much.
respected each other. They were friends, for their most of the time they were on the bench or whatever it is, probably even before then, because they were both intellectuals and they both respected that. But they're just, hey, you're a person, and I can hang out with you and
Mhm.
disagree about everything, whatever. But when you boil it down, we're still people,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
So that's the way I look at stuff. I try to, at least.
Mm. How do you want to go about leaving the world better than you found it?
I like that question because you asked that of my classes and stuff, but I think I'm working on it now, honestly, just
Mhm.
helping as many people as possible in the best way I can,
Mhm.
which is, right now it's career stuff, and otherwise it's what I know. And imparting years of experience and just, like you said, pain and suffering onto people so they don't have to deal with it. Or telling them that they will have to deal with it and it's okay. You'll get
Mhm.
through it. Because I have so many students right now being like, "Oh, I sent out 30 applications and I haven't heard anything." And I'm like, better send out 30 more, 100 more, 200 more. I don't
Yeah.
care. That's the suffering part, is looking for a job is suffering. It's a job. And I mean, that's my thing, is just, I was put, if there's a God, I was put on this earth to help others.
Mm.
That's my purpose. I figured out my purpose, let's say 10 years ago,
Yeah.
right? That I was really, this is my superpower, is I have this ability to be able to help people, whatever that is.
You do.
I just need to translate that better to myself, but it makes me feel good, and that's not why I do it. It's because it needs to be done.
Mm.
I feel like it does. There are so many people in the age group that we deal with college kids that are just lost because they're told that, oh, they can't ever afford a house, they'll never pay off their student loans, they'll be stuck in some job they hate their whole life, and that's not true. It's
Right.
not.
Right. Correct.
And I have to like show them, hey, if you want to pursue a finance degree because you want to work in finance, fine, but you can also just get a business degree, or there's lots of avenues to get to the same point you want to get to, and that point you want to get to is not where you're going to end up. Most likely, it might be, depending on how focused you are. But you and I both know, you sang on a cruise ship at one point. I was a high school teacher. I worked at Dollar Tree, for God's sake, and all these other different places, just trying to figure out what I was doing. And it's, I was put here to help people, and that's how I do it. And I also, obviously, that little girl that I'm raising is how I leave the world better than I can, is because she's a better person than me. And I have to make sure she stays that way and does not get turned into a cynical old person who hates everything in some cases and ends up finding joy and peace and grace in life.
Yeah. Amen to that. So at this point, I want to open it up for you to share any final thoughts with us. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you think would be helpful for us to know?
If you find something in life that actually makes you happy, like truly happy, not chemically happy or otherwise, things like that,
Right.
you need to dig further into what that is. There's all these like misconceptions too. It's like, oh, you can do what you love and make the amount of money. Not always, but you can do a job and still on the side, or find a way to do what you love, or at least maybe you need to build a business to do that. Maybe you need to take some other avenue. But yeah, I mean, don't let people put you in a little box as far as where you should be going. Because we had Mark and I's parents came from the silent generation and the boomers, and they were all just put on I feel like somebody wound them up and just pushed them down a path. Luckily, I mean, your dad was an entrepreneur and your mom they didn't take that path necessarily, because I feel like leaving their home country has a lot to do with it. In your case, like taking a huge risk and a chance, and that's not the norm for that generation.
Absolutely.
At least American generation.
Yeah, you're not
I would
kidding.
say.
Yep.
My grandma, I don't know, took that chance, coming here from the Philippines or whatever, but I don't know that she was given a choice there either. But it's like you have to take some calculated risk, and I feel like we've just pushed that right out the window because, oh God, risk, you wear 12 masks when you go outside, then there's no risk of you getting anything. And it's like, come on,
Right.
just like go out in a Darth Vader helmet. Don't worry, you won't get COVID anymore. You might just, look like an idiot and not be able to breathe or whatever it is.
Right.
But there are calculated risks in life. And every decision is that. It's like looking at things like trade-offs and personal opportunity cost. I do this all day long where I'm like, all right, I've got some time when I'm not working or I'm not doing things. What do I do with that time? Is that efficient, or am I just leaning down the dopamine side of my brain, and that's what I'm going to do? And every once in a while you need a dopamine injection in your brain.
Yeah.
Whatever that is, So, but yeah, I mean, and try to focus on the positive. Even in the most negative of negative situations. One of the most horrible but poignant thoughts I guess I've had right now is, I hate to say it with my mother, but I'm kind of glad she passed away last year and not this year, because this would have been a horrible experience. One, from a anxiety perspective of her, and plus the fact that, COVID would have targeted her, definitely even worse. It's like some form of grace was given in that sense. And it sucks because I miss my mother, obviously, very much. And I had Claire the other day being like, well, I don't want to be a lady when I'm older because grandma was a lady and she died. And I'm like, oh God, Claire, don't think of things. That's okay. Grandma was old and she was sick, and but you have to find the positive. I was like, the positive is she's at rest. She's not upset. She's not sick anymore. So we need to. It's like if I could find a social media account that is nothing but like positive thoughts, but poignant positive thoughts, I would just look at that. instead
Right.
of all the sniping and the, everything else that's going on.
Yeah, that's true. So where can people find you and connect with you online?
I just look, easiest thing is just Google me and go to LinkedIn.
Mhm.
You know, I'm happy for people to contact me on LinkedIn,
Yeah.
and then we can exchange personal information from there on. Um, I have a very unique name. It's really easy to find me, to
Yeah.
be honest. Unfortunately, I'm not Muhammad and I'm not Bob. So,
Right.
you find me pretty easily.
Right. Right. Miles, thank you so much. This has been an amazing interview, actually.
Happy to do it.
There is such gold in the things that you shared. So much, not just about suffering, but and getting through tough times, but also just your perspective on life and your perspective on what you want, on how we need to be with other people. I mean, it's all tied and connected with each other, and I really appreciate you taking time to share some of those thoughts with us today. Thank you.
Sure. It's all aspirational in many senses, but that's how life is. You aspire to be these things, and you may aspire your whole life, but at least you're aspiring towards positivity and not negativity, and lifting others up versus tearing others down. So that's how you have to work, or how you have to live and work towards.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe and leave a rating. Or sign up for my free updates at my website, markabotros.com, and you'll never miss a post. If this was really helpful to you, the highest compliment you can pay is to share it with someone else. Or feel free to connect with me on social media. I would love to hear from you.